Erica and Sharon are sisters who began their grief journey in 2006 when Erica's 10-year-old son Austin drowned. Together, they participated in a grief education program, were so moved by this experience, they studied and became specialists so they could help the brokenhearted find recovery. In 2015, tragedy struck their family once again when Erica's oldest son, Donovan, was killed in a motorcycle accident. Erica and Sharon are committed to sharing their experiences of love, loss, and healing through this podcast. Now your grief specialists, Sharon and Erica.
Hey friends, welcome back. Today is February 20th. And if you guys haven't heard, Texas has frozen over. So today, Erica will not be joining us for our recording. And we're going to miss her. This whole time she is digging out snow and trying to find water. I love her. I'm sending her a lot of good energy. And she's trying to keep it funny right now and survive. But in lieu of Erica, I have an amazing guest that I want to introduce you guys to. This is my client, Giovanna.
Hi.
You can call her Gigi.
Yes, it's much more personal.
Yeah. Gigi and I just walked through her very own personal grief journey. And she's an amazing young woman. And I wasn't much convincing, but I said, please, please, please come and share your story because it will help so many people to hear what it was like for you from beginning until now. So Gigi, introduce yourself real quick to our friends. And remember, you can tell as little or as much as you like.
Yeah. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me on here. And you've been, considering to have me as a guest. I'm honored. So as you said, my name is Gigi. I'm born and raised in LA. And I came to you when I lost my father, February 12th of 2020 from Alzheimer's. And, with any first major death, you're confused, you're lost, you're alone, you're questioning. And I felt very fortunate to have had a network of women who could have referred me to you. Otherwise, I would not have known that grief counseling and, grief therapy was even a thing that existed. So I feel, blessed and privileged to have even been able to experience our journey together.
I'm glad you said that because what happens a lot of times, Gianna, is that the griever doesn't call me. The grievers call me a lot. But what happens is usually the person sitting next to the griever and they call because they're looking for the resource. And so it's not always that the griever calls. So I think about that all the time because I did some interviews lately and every single one of them came about by someone else calling and saying, and the truth is, you're so down in the trenches trying to figure the grief out. You're not thinking about, hey, I need to call somebody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's probably it's an interesting experience. And I say that lightheartedly because it shows that you can have multiple conflicting emotions existing at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're not even really looking, how do I get out of this? But more so like, how do I not cry for the next 24 hours? It's very hour by hour point of view that you're not even looking at like, how do I recover from this? It's just, how do I maintain and survive with this?
And how good were you at not crying within a 24-hour period?
Oh, at the beginning, not at all. I was crying every day. I mean, my circumstance was a little different with just so much that had happened prior to my dad passing and then after his passing, that it kind of restricted me from actually processing the grief because I was handling, other arrangements and things like that. So, I mean, I would burst into tears just if there was like a dad in a commercial, There's just all these triggers that I didn't think I had or would have that I started to, face. And then, of course, it gets better now after having done the counseling with you. Do I still get sad and emotional? Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where I see a dad at a wedding and I'm not going to cry, but it hurts less.
Yeah.
And that's what's the best part about it is that I can be there at the wedding watching this. It hurts, but I can be there.
Yeah.
The difference that I've noticed.
That's great. That's a great description of what it feels like to be healed, right? You're always going to miss him.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, my heart is full when I hear you say a wedding because that's something
Yeah.
that we will always think about. Okay. I think most of our followers are probably thinking, her dad died of Alzheimer's. She's so young.
Yes.
So your dad was young.
He was. So my dad was 63 when he passed last year, and I was 25. Um, and but so he passed at 63, but he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's for 5 years prior. So that's what, 58 he was diagnosed. Um, there's so many factors that could have potentially attributed to his diagnosis. But you're right, he was really young, and so was I, really young, having to kind of go through this new territory that I was so unfamiliar with. I mean, who at 21 years old is thinking about Alzheimer's? You know what I
Right,
mean?
exactly. And that's why I think that the reason I even mentioned that, because I think most of us think, it happens to much older people and the children are much older. I mean, it almost was like you were thrust right into
Yeah.
adulthood and a real life experience, right?
Yeah. I was a child parenting my parent.
Yeah.
I mean, really, 21, as old as you think you may be, you're not. Like,
Yeah.
you're still a kid.
Yeah.
Even now at 26, I'm still a kid.
Yeah. I think of you as a kid.
Thank you.
So, I want to kind of go like this. Let's talk about the Alzheimer's, and then let's talk about the grief. So that's kind of where I'm going to take you. So in the beginning,
Yeah.
I would imagine you were hoping that the diagnosis was not true.
Mm-hmm.
Were you looking at him and expecting him to get better?
Mm-hmm.
And were there moments where you were looking at him going, no, they've misdiagnosed him. I don't see any signs of this.
Well, so gosh, so I remember the moment, and I remember the moment that I got the call. It was from my stepmom. I was home from home from college for, I think, like spring break or something like that. I was in my bedroom at my mom's house, and she called. And when she said, I dropped to my knees and just started crying, because I'm like, what does this mean? Right? I mean, with so many illnesses, terminal illnesses especially, the knowledge isn't publicly known, and you don't know about it until you're having to deal with it. So was I, like, in what is it, in
Denial.
thank you. About his diagnosis? Absolutely. Because for me, he was still that dad that I knew when I was a little girl. I'm like, there's no way. I mean, he's so young, blah, blah, blah. So I was definitely in denial. However, in terms of, no, they've misdiagnosed him, there were signs of my dad, that we just thought, oh, that's dad. Little things like spelling errors, forgetting his phone places, or, not closing the fridge door and things like that. Now, I didn't live with him at this time. And so, I was getting a lot of my information from his wife. But still, even when I was, living with him part-time, there were little things that I could link to now his diagnosis that made sense. But at the same time, who wants to come to come to the reality of the fact that your dad has Alzheimer's? So yeah, like, no, this isn't real. This isn't real. And I really, I didn't really want to know about it. I didn't want to understand it, because if I understood it, then I knew what lied ahead. And I really don't think that I understood it until his decline was very apparent. The stuttering, the unable to put his shoes on. Like, that's when it started to get really real, because the first 2 years of his diagnosis, he couldn't drive. So I would pick him up, or, he was still my dad. He was still, charismatic and laughing and joking and able to put complete sentences together. And so it didn't feel real until the declines really started to happen.
Right.
Did I answer all those questions?
Yes, you did beautifully. I love it. So there came a time where you got really involved.
Yes.
where you really got involved. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are kind of personal, but did you
Okay.
ever feel resentful of having to get involved? Because it's a normal reaction to have. And then did you ever feel abandoned, like you were out there doing it by yourself?
So resentful, I'd say yes, but not necessarily at him. With Alzheimer's, you really are dealing, even with a grown adult, you're dealing with someone with a mental capacity of 5 to 10-year-old, just
Right.
depending on where they are. So I was never angry at him. I was angry at the world.
Yeah.
I was angry at God or whoever it is, whatever
Yeah.
it is you believe in. I was angry at why me, why him, why this, why that, why Alzheimer's of all freaking things, and I did feel really alone. So, I'm my dad's only child. And then he remarried to a woman that has pretty much her immediate family that lives close by. So anytime I'd see him, I'd have to arrange with his wife, and then I'd have to drive down, and then it was really me. And of course, my mom, would ask and try to get involved, but I noticed that I really pushed everyone away, that I didn't want anyone being a part of this. Because for some odd reason, I was kind of like protective of the situation. So that probably caused me to feel more alone than I needed to feel. But just for the mere fact that I was his only kid, that, yeah, I felt very much abandoned, very much like all of this was on my shoulders type of
Yeah.
a deal.
Yeah. We're from a family of 5 children. And when my dad died, it's not that I pushed everyone away. We were trying to do everything together, but I remember this feeling of, this is my chance to give back to him for everything he's done for me. I don't know if any of that was like that for you, but I remember I felt like this is my chance to really take care of him. And I felt so honored to be able to do it, even the ugly parts. So I don't know if that was but I just remember that.
100%.
Did you have unrealistic expectations of things that I have to do this, or I must do everything for him, or I must visit him every day? And that eventually you're like, this is not going to work out.
Yes. You know, it's such a weird place to be in, especially when you're still a young adult. At the time I was working 9 to 5. I was commuting from Santa Clarita to Glendale, working 9 to 5. And then where he lived was Claremont, which is, about an hour and a half there and about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on traffic back. So I would try to go every weekend or every other weekend. And, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Just the commute for work and then the weekend commute. And I did that. I mean, all 5 years of him being diagnosed to passing. But yeah, I mean, I always felt like I could be doing more. I should be there right now. And you do set these unrealistic expectations of, I have to, and I'm also kind of like a control person. And so that's something that I've learned as well. It's like, I can't, yeah, it's like, okay, calm down, you can't do everything. So I think that had a little bit about it, because it's my dad, right? I want to control the situation. I want to be there. I want to be his kid. I want to. But in reality, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so that was a part of the expectations that I had of myself and of the situation, and then just the reality of it.
You also brought another memory to me, is that whenever there was a doctor's appointment, I wanted to be at the doctor's appointment because I wanted to hear it for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want the secondhand information, because I felt like they always put their twist on it. And I have a sister who's a nurse practitioner, and she's amazing. She's amazing at her job, but she always can, she comes across with that doctor terminology, and I'm like, no, I want to hear it for myself. And then there was this point where I did a lot of research. Were you doing a lot of research?
I did do a good amount of research. My research was more so what holistic alternatives I could, like coconut oil is really good for like cognitive abilities. Blueberries. I was trying really hard. CoQ10.
Yeah.
To give him all of these like holistic supplements, but the reality is, and maybe that's where my hope was, like, maybe if we just pump him with all these holistic supplements and, he'll get better. But with terminal illnesses, there is no getting better.
Yeah.
And even if we did pump him with all these holistic supplements, sure, it could prolong the situation, but it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And that's where that huge denial aspect. I just didn't know what Alzheimer's was. I didn't know. I was so unprepared to handle it.
Yeah.
And it's a nasty, nasty disease. So it's sad, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I on that same token of you pumping him full, I have, like I said, I have a sister who's a nurse practitioner. So her thing was all, we're going to eat this diet. And she was taking out all the carbs and just doing all this stuff. And at the same time, I was sneaking in the fried chicken. And he literally sneaking it into him. And came a part where he kind of almost was like verging on dementia. But he knew that stuff when I would bring it. And he would hide it from her. He knew to hide it from her. So at least I guess you didn't have the evil sister. My take on it, honestly, was that I don't know how much time he has here, but I want him to enjoy the time that he has here. And that was yeah. Did there ever come a time where you felt bad that you were still enjoying life and you were still able to do things and he was at home suffering?
All the time. All the time. All the time. I mean, it was, especially there was this one time, and I don't want to make this like too sad and sappy or anything, because I want the listeners to actually enjoy my story. But there was this one time that my dad was in a psychiatric hospital, and I, went, and it was during Thanksgiving weekend or week. And so I went down to see him multiple times as he stayed there. And every time I left, I just had this constant, like, I can leave. He has to stay. It's like when you leave someone from prison, right?
Yeah.
I have all this freedom. I have the luxury of driving, of eating, of going to sleep when I want, all the time.
Yeah.
And it was even after his passing, it's like, how do I live to fully and be comfortable with, living fully and doing what I want to do, but then also knowing that he's suffering, he suffered, he's passed, and so it's this constant battle of, it's not my reality, but it is my reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. Great answer. Did you feel like you were failing him because you couldn't be there 24/7 to do the care?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To your point, it's like you want to be the first person to know these things. You don't want to telephone information. The situation with my dad is just where he lived, right? I mean, we in LA literally lived on separate ends of LA, and this was, pre-COVID, so traffic was still a thing, and it was just gnarly all the time. And so I wanted to be there all the time. I wanted to be the one making his food and doing, because I also felt that I had more of a patience and understanding and love, like, from daughter to father.
Yeah.
Versus, when you're married to the person, you're like, oh my God, even, it's like, they get so annoying. Like, I'm sure they do.
Yeah. I know, but I don't know. I think at this time you throw that out the window, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a story, but yeah, I mean, I absolutely, I felt like I failed him for not being there. I wanted to be there more than I was even capable of.
Yeah. So did there come a time, Gianna, where Giovanna?
That's okay.
Did there come a time? My niece is Gianna, so that's why I keep saying. Okay. Did there ever come a time where you walked in and he didn't know who you were?
Yes. Yes, and that was the most difficult part. With Alzheimer's, there are going to be new thresholds, right?
Yeah.
When you decline, this is the new normal.
Right.
And so, at first it was, he'd forget words, he'd, forget times and, distant families' names and, just normal forgetfulness. And then it got to, he forgot, he doesn't know how to put his shoes on. He can't change himself. He can't use the restroom, brushing his teeth, eat, these things. And then I think one of the last declines was him not necessarily, he knew me, like he recognized me, but he didn't know our relationship. So with Alzheimer's, the person with the disease usually asks the same question over and over and over again. So I remember our tradition was I'd come down, I'd see him, I'd take him out to lunch. There's this little downtown area where he lived that we'd walk around, and there's a candy shop, a DVD shop. Like we'd have our little tour.
Yeah.
And I remember we were driving back, and he kept asking me, who are you? Who are you? And I was like, well, I'm your daughter. And he's like, who's your dad? And I was like, well, you're my dad. And then he just kept asking that so much that I just started describing him to him. So I was like, what's your dad like? Who's your dad? And so I was just like, oh, my dad's this great guy. He's Italian man. Like, he used to work on the police force. Like, it just kind of like build him up, hype him up. And he would be like, wow, he sounds like a great guy.
Oh, that must have been a hard day.
It was hard.
Yeah.
Definitely hard. I mean, no one at any age, that was difficult. But especially, and I don't mean to keep bringing my age into it, but it was just such a challenging time, like fresh out of college. My life is ahead of me. I think I'm going to, I think one thing, and then this happened. And then now my life is my dad. I mean, for 5 years after college, my life was my dad.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was difficult because it's also, how do you handle certain situations, right? Of the person with Alzheimer's is going to get irritated. They're not going to understand. They can't communicate. So you, as the other person, how do you assess and adjust the situation to make sure that person is comfortable, isn't, freaking out or anything like that? And it's a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah.
In any regard. So
yeah. I think that is so true. And that you're like, I keep mentioning my age. Your age is huge. There's other things. It's like, you were so young, right? That's number one. But number two, you were the only child also. You know what I mean? And so, yes, those 2 points are huge to this story. So, this is what I want to do. I want to, for you to tell us who your dad, say his name, so everybody can know who he is. We're talking about. We're going to end the show here, and we're going to make this a 2-part because next I want to talk about. We'll do what it's like to grieve during Alzheimer's. So tell us a little bit your personal story about your dad. That's where I'd like to end.
Yeah, my dad was my best friend. His name is Steven Sarnicola, but he would go by Stefano Sarnicola because chicks dig it. His line, not even kidding. He's Italian, obviously. He's a twin, one of 4. My family migrated from Naples, Italy to New York, from New York to California. He grew up in the 50s, taught me all about Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, big band. I'm an old man deep down inside. And, he went to the police force in the 80s and then was on the U.S. Marshal Service for 25 years after that. Just kind of badass guy,
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing them with us. Guys, remember, this is part 1. That was just grieving through the Alzheimer's. And then we're going to talk about, that was dealing with the Alzheimer's. And now we're going to talk about, look for part 2 of grieving through Alzheimer's. See you on part 2, guys. Bye.
Okay.
Hi, friends. Erica Honore here with Healing Starts with the Heart. Sharon and I are so glad you joined us for another great episode of our podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We want to let you know, for more information, you can go to our website at healingstartswiththeheart.com. There you will find not only today's podcast, but all of our podcasts, along with our blogs, the information on the programs that we offer, and the Griever's Guide, which is something Sharon and I put together to document how we came to be your grief specialists. We also have a quiz to take to identify if you are truly grieving. And if you want to talk specifically with either Sharon or myself, you can schedule an appointment there. You will also find a place to join our private Facebook group at Hope, Heal, and Recover. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great day, friends.